Alright guys, K. Smith here, Total Force Holdings. I'm going to start off by saying the incident that happened in Vegas a while back, absolutely tragic. My thoughts are going out to all those affected by that still. You got a long road to hoe, but stay in that fight. And yeah, hopefully the investigators and all can figure out kind of what was going on for sure. And that's just unfortunately Vegas has now entered that one club that the only requirement is to be a victim of terrorism, as far as our city goes. One of those things you don't absolutely do not want to be a part of that club, but it's a list that kind of grows as time goes on. And first off, this is an act of terror. Doesn't matter who he was linked with, or even if he was by himself. Terrorism is defined as violence causing fear. Excuse me, heartburn. And the use of that fear to further a political, religious, or ideological gain. Let's break this down. Political gain. Using bump stocks or some shit like that, or even an NFA weapon or something like that to show why we need more gun control. That is using violence and the fear caused by violence to further that political gain. An ideological gain. And I kind of group the religious and ideological thing together because it's both how you see the world, your idea kind of thing. So that would be like the ISIL attacking Christian villages or things like that. Damn, it looks like it might rain later. Alright, hopefully I get this video done before it takes to rain, and I'm kind of out here on my porch, and it's just 10 above me, so if it starts to rain, it'll get awful loud. But anyway, it's pretty safe to say that this dude who's very left-leaning, that's my assessment. I'm not going to go ahead and get into my full conclusion, but I'll say my assessment is this was done by a left-wing or a I'm just going to leave it at that. By left-wing players or players to highlight the need for more gun control in this country, because that's been something that the left has been harping on. Hell, the fucking bodies wasn't even cold yet before Hillary Clinton started raising hell about suppressors, and I don't even think the ME was done with them before Dianne Feinstein, dumbass, started rewriting that bump stock bill, and Moulton and somebody else was writing it in the House. I got no time for it. Gun control is a strong subject with me, and not the least of which because I do make my living off dealing with armed people. And not the least of which because I am armed myself. Matter of fact, here within arm's reach, I've got something that Dianne Feinstein would love to ban. Alright, a semi-automatic handgun with a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. I'm pretty sure, just because this is in here, she would love it if it was a crime for you to watch this video in the state of California. But I digress. So, the fact is, our society is an armed society, and it will be an armed society. Understand, we don't have a democracy where the majority rules and the minorities left onto their own devices. No, conversely, the majority passes the law and the minority is usually protected by it. That makes sense. That's how a republic works. Okay. Anyway, when we deal with our founding document, the Constitution, we see that right after we have our protection to speak our mind, as long as we're not threatening somebody or something like that, to speak our mind and assemble in such a way that we are peaceful in nature and not acting like a bunch of criminals. We see that right after that, we have that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So let's break this down. The right of the people. It is your right. The government is acknowledging it, that it is our absolute, undeniable right. Okay? Got that. To keep and bear. To keep, to possess, and bear, and carry. Arms. This is the interesting part here. I did Rev War reenacting when I was younger, Revolutionary War stuff. And we would march with our muskets, and the bayonets were not affixed. It was called a firelock. A sporting arm of the time would have been a Fowler, a piece, a firelock, a musket, a rifle, by name. Arms was specifically limited to frontline military weapons. Because the Kentucky long rifle couldn't take a bayonet. A fowling piece, a shotgun, couldn't take a bayonet. Only a frontline military musket could. Now, and if you sit there and think that bayonet made all the difference in the world, go back in time here to where you had to attempt to take ground from one of the best trained armies in the world, that being the British Regular Army. And you had to take ground, you have to close on their position. Well, if I'm going to close to your position, I don't want to get too close. If you've got a musket that can fire 3 rounds a minute, and I've got a Kentucky long rifle that I can fire 1 round a minute, I don't want to get close. So it means I can't push you off the ground. Alright? I can't just sit here and bang rifle fire at you because you have artillery. That means I've got to close that ground, and I've got to engage in a hand-to-hand fight. If you look at the linear tactics of the time, this is what you see. We stand face-to-face, shoulder-to-shoulder, we fire a few volleys until one of us gets bored, and with bayonets affixed, we charge at the other one and force you off the field. Again, look at the battle history here. Later in the war, the American forces learned to use those tactics against the British. However, a lot of Americans died leading up to that. Because the bayonet in close quarters with the tactics of that time is a hell of a tool. And if we look also at the Rev War, we notice that the earlier stages, before the fighting really kicked off, when did the skirmishes that started the war take place? When the British were there to seize weapons from the colonials. Maybe militia stockpiles, maybe they were privately owned. I don't know. I don't know who bought them. I don't care. They were trying to take weapons from the populace, and we literally fought a war over this. Of course, there were some other things like taxes and stuff like that to go along with it, but nevertheless, the shooting actually started when they tried to take our weapons. So the men who endured this conflict, our founding fathers, although they were certainly far from perfect people, they did things I don't agree with, like holding of slaves and things like that, but that was the times. Like, to sit there and say wealthy people owning slaves was like wealthy people having more than one car in this country. Or today, at least, it's like today, wealthy people having more than one car. It's part of the times. Alright? Certainly not defending it. It just is what it is. So, these people are highly intelligent. I mean, understand, you've got Benjamin Franklin sitting there, and anybody that says he was a dummy is probably the dummy themselves. Alright? And they sit there and say, this right, the right to own military weapons and carry weapons, shall not be infringed. I would imagine it's safe to say that, considering our government tried to acquire a few of them, they were familiar with a puckle gun. The puckle gun was essentially a repeating firearm, except it's more like light artillery than a firearm. Very light artillery, but still, certainly not small arms. All right. Manually operated multiple shot repeater. And you had this like something like 20 or 30 shot air rifle at the time as well. So to say they couldn't envision that the future might hold higher capacity, faster firing, more portable weapons is asinine, to say the least. And frankly, it's insulting to those who praise the history of this country, as far as the intellectuals that were involved with the founding and things like that. So to me, when they say the founding fathers couldn't, that's like a grave insult. I kind of want to slap somebody in the face when they say that to me. I don't, because I don't like going to jail. But I digress again. So we have this enumerated very highly. So we need to look at what is actually meant by it. Understand, the Second Amendment had nothing to do with protecting your ability to own something to shoot animals for hunting with. It had nothing to do with recreational shooting of any kind. It had nothing to do with protecting yourself from a criminal. Its actual purpose was twofold. One, should the government become so horrid, so horrible, and essentially should the government remove our American way of life, essentially, that's what they're for. That the government who has withdrawn the Constitution has withdrawn, being yanked it away, not just like rewrote it a little bit. Although I'm against that too. Um, when we see an incident like that, that would be when we would need to act. To put it this way, when you look at all of these horrendous dictators of the world in the past, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong, just to give a few here, one of the first things they did was institute very strict gun control. To stick with the Nazi German ideal here, uh, armed Jews wouldn't have got on the boxcar for Hitler's SS as easy. Okay, um, that's where this comes in. Now, understand that I think that our ability to do that and fulfill that duty was gutted by the NFA, and I'll get on the NFA in a few minutes. Also, the other side of this coin is understand that this country, its founding fathers, were not very keen on the idea of having a full-time standing army. So they left the state's militias alone, essentially. Why hasn't the federal government ever defined the militia? It's a 10th Amendment issue. It's up to the states, up to each individual state to define who does and does not constitute their militia, both organized and or unorganized. So, hence why you don't see any federal oversight on that. Well regulated. Again, that's up to the state to determine what is and is not well regulated. It's generally considered, and this could be different state to state, but it's generally considered that the unorganized militia is all those lawful to possess firearms. It's generally considered in most states that up until retirement age, if you're a lawful possessor of a firearm, you would be the unorganized militia, subject to be called up. Some states are stricter, some states are not, some states don't have a definition. How that's legal, I don't know. But it is, again, it is what it is. Ain't nothing I can do about it. And I'm trying to stay somewhat vague on that just because I don't know what state you're watching this from, and I don't know what your state's requirements are. So, now, there's your well-regulated. There's your purpose. You're to act as that militia should it be needed. Why would it be needed? We've already covered internal issues, right? Now, we look at the other flip side of the coin. And it's been attributed to Yamamoto, but during World War II, there was a saying the U.S. would never be invaded because there'd be a rifle behind every blade of grass. There you go. That's what it's for. The Second Amendment is about national security. It has nothing to do with self-defense. It has nothing to do with entertainment and enjoyment. And it has nothing to do with feeding your family. All right? Matter of fact, I'll get to a Supreme Court decision that those of you who like to use the sporting purpose argument are not going to like. Now, I think the National Firearms Act gutted our ability as citizens to uphold our responsibility under the Second Amendment. Namely because if our purpose is to defend against military parties, whether that be our own or foreign, that's irrelevant. When you're dealing with modern selective fire weapons and we have to go through all this kind of crap and get all kinds of government permission rather, to get these things, it's gutted it. It's gutted our. I'm fervently convinced the NFA is illegal. Heartburn again. I'm not suggesting you go otherwise acquire. If you catch my drift there, I'm certainly not suggesting you otherwise acquire NFA items because you will go to prison and you will be heavily fined. Notice how I said and. It won't be or. You will go to prison and you will owe the federal government a shit ton of money. So don't do it. But then I'm going to touch on the NFA and all later with a few other gun control laws. So, since I've just discussed the Second Amendment, I feel it necessary to go ahead and bring up a Supreme Court decision from 1939. 5 years after the National Firearms Act was passed, and point out a few things here. One, it's generally accepted in this country per constitutional law that you cannot tax someone for exercising their right. And I quote from the United States versus Miller, 1939 Supreme Court decision. And these are the arguments used by the United States attorneys in favor of prosecuting the defendant in this case. I forget his first name, Miller, was his last, who, had this been in 1968, it would have been a done deal. He was a convicted felon and bank robbery kind of thing. And he was traveling across state lines carrying I want to say it was a Stevens sawed-off shotgun. So, here's the arguments that the U.S. attorneys used in favor of prosecuting Mr. Miller. National Firearms Act is intended as a revenue collecting measure and therefore within the authority of the Department of the Treasury. Break. Wait a minute, but you're not supposed to be able to tax the exercise of a right. Yet they just admitted this is a tax on the exercise of our Second Amendment rights. Resume quote. The defendants transported the shotgun from Oklahoma to Arkansas and therefore used it in interstate commerce. Okay. The Second Amendment protects only the owner. Here we go. Here's the good one. The Second Amendment protects only the ownership of military-type weapons appropriate for use in an organized militia. Protects only the ownership of military-type weapons. Okay, so let's look at that purview with Miller here to the National Firearms Act against modern day. National Firearms Act regulates, and I'm going to scroll up a little bit in my notes, very specifically, machine guns, selective fire weapons. You know, well, I was issued 2 different rifles in my time in the Marine Corps. One was an M16A, well, several different models, but 2 different models of rifle. 2 different models of rifle. One was an M16A2, safe semi, 3-round burst. You pull the trigger, hold it back, 3 rounds fire. The M16A4 I was also issued was very similar to that. Every M16, every M4 have a similar selective fire module, selective fire trigger in it. And that's not even getting into the M240 Bravo, the M240 Golf, the M2HB. That's not even getting into that. This is every individual infantry rifle. So to suggest that a machine gun is not covered under Miller versus United States is to ignore the arguments of the United States attorneys that passed the damn decision, or that gave the argument that caused the Supreme Court decision here. What about short-barreled rifles? Well, every M4 carbine. Well, first let's define a short-barreled rifle. A rifle with a barrel less than 16 inches. Well, every M4 carbine has a barrel length of 14.5 inches. Well, you could put and weld it. Not on a military gun. They're 14.5 inch barrel, and that flash hider will come off just as easy as the 20-inch guns. Okay? That's irrelevant. Short-barrel shotgun. Do you know how many 14-inch Remington 870s are in evidence in the military arms room? Just saying. But we can't have one that's got a buttstock on it with a barrel less than 18 inches. Suppressors. There's a Marine infantry battalion running around with all their weapons suppressed right now. It's test theory. But you just said they're just testing it. Okay. Look at any special operations unit. You tell me their gear is not suitable for military use? Of course it is. How many of them have suppressors? Just say it. Destructive devices. This would be like CBRNE stuff. I have no issue with the CBRN. Chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. But explosive, okay, I understand there might need to be some regulation on that, but let's look at the constitutionality of this based on the Supreme Court decision. A bore over a half inch, not a standard shotgun. Okay, well, I'm not familiar with the military using anything as far as small arms like that. Alright, you got like 20 millimeter and things like that, but those are vehicle mounted weapons. The so-called sporting purposes exemption for shotguns, okay. Well, I come out of the Marine Corps, so if you look at a standard Marine Corps fire team, you've got one M249 saw, one machine gun, two riflemen with a selective fire rifle, and one grenadier who attached underneath his rifle was an M203 40mm grenade launcher. Okay? This is the same DD, destructive device thing, that suggests that if I have my legal 37mm flare launcher and I load it with buckshot instead of something else, then that would be illegal. It's stupid. It's stupid, to say the least. Then they've got this catch-all category called any other weapon. If I were to take this Glock pistol right here and take that light off, and on that rail, shoot a little notch, put a vert grip on there. I don't know why I'd want to, but if I did, that would be an AOW. A shotgun under 26 inches in overall length has never been fitted with a stock. So you get some of these Remington 870 deals with the shockwave grip, and you cut it down to 25. At 26 it's okay, but at 25 it's an AOW. Firearm concealed as any other item, like wallets and walking stick, guns and stuff like that. Well, where does this fit into with the military thing if you're arguing about the the M26 lightweight shotgun system? It is a shotgun, never fitted with a buttstock, less than 26 inches overall in most cases. There's your AOW gone right there. So per Miller, in modern times, the NFA is illegal. Okay, the way our military has evolved, using the arguments of the U.S. attorneys involved with the Miller decision, we have essentially negated the NFA. But it's there. Why? Well, because it originally wanted to ban handguns and everything else, and the gun-owning public essentially compromised. Well, we'll let you ban these as long as you don't go after these. So, which brings me to my next big point. No compromises, ever. We cannot compromise with the left. Every time we do, we get things like the NFA, we get Gun Control Act 68, we get the Hughes Amendment to Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986, we get the Brady Act, and we get AWB 94. We cannot compromise with them. Okay, to an anti-gunner, compromise means you gimme, you ain't getting nothing. We got to do that to them. Okay, we've got to say, okay, if you give us this, then you give us this and this. So, okay, you want to ban bump stocks? Cool, I got you. You give us nationwide reciprocity and repeal of the Hughes Amendment. Why? Well, we gave you too much for too long. It's high time your side ponies up a little bit. Okay? That's just an example. So now, let's talk about some of these other laws that we got. Gun Control Act of 68. Instituted prohibited possessors. Now, this is a controversial opinion of mine, especially with some of the law enforcement guys I run. I'm of the opinion that if you are too dangerous to have all of your civil and constitutional rights, you don't need to be out of prison. If you have paid your debt to society, you should have all of your civil and constitutional rights. Well, that came about because of the Gun Control Act. That's how it used to be, for the most part, as far as your firearms, right? And then Gun Control Act 68 got passed, and now there were people that we said couldn't have their Second Amendment rights anymore. That's wrong. That is wrong. Okay, so just because you went to prison, you can no longer have your First Amendment rights? What about your Third Amendment rights? What about your Fourth Amendment rights? It's a slippery slope, and I don't care much for it. Okay, and then you have to have the license to sell firearms. That's the government collecting taxes. That's all it is. Then they have this so-called sporting purposes import restriction, where only traditional competition or hunting could be honored, especially for handguns. What this did is essentially, now understand, anti-gunners of today are the Democratic Party. And they are the champion of, we do things for the little guy who's not so well off financially. Understand, anti-gunners like them are the reason you can't have access to good, high-quality imported firearms that are cheap. All right, because there's this point system, and you have to be you have so many points per caliber, and so many points for this, and so many points for that, and a semi-automatic pistol has to accumulate 75 of these points, It must have a manual safety. It must be at least 4 inches. Put my pistol up. It must be at least 4 inches in height here and at least 6 inches in length. A revolver must pass the safety test, which they don't stipulate what that is on the ATF form, but you're going to look this form up yourself. It's ATF form 4590. Revolver must have an overall frame length of 4.5 inches and a barrel of at least 3 inches. Now, I don't have a revolver handy to demonstrate that, but it's all broke down on the 4590 if you want to look into it a little bit more. So, and I don't know exactly what was compromised on that, but I'm quite certain that those who put that into place wanted to go after more. Just because that would be par for the course, wouldn't it? Firearms Owners Protection Act of '86. This started as a good law for gun owners. It gave us safe passage, where, let's say we were going to a strict gun control state. Funny, with New Jersey liking to prosecute people here. You cannot be prosecuted if you're passing through. This would be like, maybe you're literally just driving through and making a short stop for food or fuel only. If the weapon is in transit, secured out of the accessible area. Okay? By federal law, you cannot be prosecuted for that if you're just passing through the state. But someone said, well, we need to da-da-da-da-da, and someone gave the idea to compromise on this and say, okay, you can have that as long as we get this. And we get the Hughes Amendment, which means no new machine guns on the NFA registry. We essentially capped the amount of machine guns on the registry that are in civilian hands. That's why if you look up NFA guns, you see a pre-86 transferable, post-86 dealer sample, things like that. Pre-86, if you get a tax stamp, you can get it. If it's post-86, nope. If you ain't got the appropriate FFL, not going to happen. Now, let's think about this for a minute. Even if we allow for a minute the NFA is legal and constitutional, which I do not think it is, let's follow me here. The government is always wanting more money. People like machine guns. People that have the money to pay for them want machine guns. All right, I don't have the money for machine guns, otherwise I would. I mean, if I could afford one, I'd have me a 240 all day long. Twice on Sunday. Especially if I can afford to also feed it. Every time you buy a machine, every time you do anything with a machine gun, there's a $200 tax. You manufacture it, $200 tax. You sell it, $200 tax. You transfer it to your buddy because he's got a tax stamp he wants one too, $200 tax. The government could make a shit ton of money off of that if they would just get rid of the damn Hughes Amendment, but they don't want to listen. They know machine guns are bad. Alright? They're stupid. Alright? I think the NFA is illegal in the first place, so that would negate the Hughes Amendment, but that's just me. Now we look at the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, another knee-jerk reaction in '93 that instituted the NICS check system. The NICS check system is, one, notoriously unreliable, and two, it goes into that thing, well, you know, we could take the constitutional rights from some people, and we're going to go ahead and verify that. That whether you do or do not have that constitutional right anymore. Last time I checked, constitutional rights are universal. To sit there and use a few laws to restrict people, that's wrong. Alright? Then we get the AWB in '94, where we got the 10-round magazine capacity limit. Rifles couldn't have folding or telescoping or collapsing stocks. You couldn't have a pistol grip on your rifle. You couldn't have a bayonet lug on your rifle. You couldn't have a flash suppressor on your rifle. You couldn't have a rifle grenade adapter on your rifle. When in the history of the United States has someone been killed with a fucking rifle grenade on purpose? I'm not familiar of that incident. If you are, by all means, let me know. With pistols, if the magazine went anywhere but the pistol grip, like I say, like the Tech 9 where it goes in front of the trigger guard, alright, that was a no-go. Alright, you couldn't have a threaded barrel on your pistol. You couldn't have a barrel shroud on your pistol. Alright, shotguns with a folding or collapsing stock were a no-go. I got a folding stock on my 870 right now. Shotguns with a pistol grip were questionable. Semi-automatic shotgun with a detachable magazine. I'm pretty sure all of these were semi-automatic for the shotgun. But anyway, detachable magazine on a shotgun was a no-go. And the AWB, as it passed, was a watered-down version of the original draft. I would hate to see what it originally looked like. Alright? And all this, the assault weapons ban was wrote by Dianne Feinstein. Why the hell she's still in office is beyond me. Because All these gun control laws are an attempt to infringe upon our right to keep and bear military-style weapons, is it not? We've already established that. That's what keep and bear arms means, all right? To possess and carry military-type weapons. So now I introduce you to part of the United States Code, 18 U.S. Code 2384. 18 U.S. Code deals with federal criminal law. 2384 is the specific statute. The statute I'm quoting is called seditious conspiracy. And it says, and I'm not quoting the law directly, but the important part here is, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. Prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. If you're going to hinder my ability to keep and bear arms, you are guilty of seditious conspiracy. To be seditious conspiracy, it means 2 or more people have to be involved in it. So every time, what I see when I see these bills coming up, because by the way, the legislative process is not, I repeat, is absolutely not a defense for seditious conspiracy. All I see is a bunch of criminals. There's the law. You make your own decision. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. And that's why I'm not putting comments up, enabling comments on this video, because I really don't want to hear it. It is what it is. The law says what the law says. And it's high time politicians quit trying to ignore that. All right, so now, what can we do as far as gun owners to stop them from gutting it more than they already have? One, we have to accept no compromise. No compromise, no compromise, no compromise. You tell your politicians, no compromise. Do not compromise on gun control, ever. And then if they do, you vote against them and you encourage others to do the same. If they vote in favor of good gun laws for us, meaning stuff that deregulates things, you vote for them, you encourage others to vote for them. If they don't and they go the anti-gun side, you vote against them, encourage others to do so. Okay? Stand up, grow a backbone, all right? Quit accepting it. You do not have to accept compromise. That's bullshit. That's a bullshit notion passed by people who want to go along and get along, and we're far beyond that. Okay? The left has done shown they want to kill people that do not think like them. They've already said it. People like them say it all the freaking time. Okay? They're trying to gut our Constitution, which makes them an enemy of this country, if you ask me, because I'm sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Just because my enlistment contract ran out does not mean my oath did. Same thing for you if you enlisted just as well. Okay? If you took an oath, it does not expire, ever. All right? So, you need to stand up and say, no, we're not standing for that anymore. What do I mean by that? You go back to what I just said a minute ago. You vote for politicians that have passed good constitutional ideas, and you vote against the ones that violate the Constitution, period. That means you have to speak your mind to other people, okay? You got to put that out there. That's what I'm doing right now, all right? And there's another reason I'm not enabling comments. I'm not giving the other side that opportunity to do that on my platform, all right? Vote hard on gun rights. It's no secret amongst my circle that I'm pretty much a single-issue voter, okay? I'm going to vote gun rights first, last, and always. Everything else is secondary at best. Okay, that if you want gun rights, that's kind of what you have to do. All right, and you need to support your local gun rights groups. All right, the NRA, I'm not very fond of them backing the bump stock ban unless they're going to get something good in return, like national reciprocity, or the repeal of the Hughes Amendment, or passing the Hearing Protection Act, or stuff like that. That kind of goes towards undoing some of these draconian gun laws that we have to live under now. All right, I'm fine with that at that point. All right, but still, I'm not very fond of the bump stock ban. The words that Dianne Feinstein and that molten dumbass and whoever his partner was, them dumbasses in the House that drafted them bill, that's a dangerous and slippery slope. And frankly, any politician that votes for them, either one of those bills, I will not vote for again. If I have already, probably haven't. And I will do everything in my power to help other people vote them out of frickin' office. All right, that's bullshit, and we don't have to accept it. Guess what? Your paycheck will quit. All right, or at least whatever your pay is for current, you'll go back to getting that used to be congressman paycheck, which I think is bullshit too. But that's a totally new issue. All right, you need to support groups like the NRA, ILA. Gun Owners of America is a good one. If you're in North Carolina, Grassroots North Carolina does awesome pro-gun work. I'm a North Carolina citizen. They're just one of the best around here. You know, hey, if you know of some other good pro-gun groups that you want to support, shoot me a PM. I'll look into them. I might throw some money their way. I might not. If nothing else, I might just do something like this and put out a video where I mention them and kind of get other people to do the same. So that's how we sit there and affect the politics, but it's not just us as gun owners aren't going to do that. We've got to sway some of those people who are on the fence about gun ownership, that maybe think gun ownership by itself is okay, but, well, we need to... Okay, first, we have to be a good role model for the Second Amendment, and that's all of us. When you do something stupid, all right, while it's known that you're a gun owner, that the anti-gunners can use against the rest of us, you're not representing you, you're representing all of us. So the first one, do not dress or act like a criminal when you're carrying a gun. You know what the criminals in your area dress and look like. All right, by look, I could care less about your skin color. Okay, I mean how you present yourself. Okay, if you're walking around looking like you just walked out of the bad side of town, probably a bad idea to be open carrying at the time. Whereas conversely, you know, if you're well dressed, well spoken, things like, and making an effort to be a good role model to show that those of us who carry guns, one, aren't a bunch of uneducated rednecks, because we're not, and two, we're not all just make my day motherfucker types. All right, you can't be like that. Either one, don't look like a criminal, don't look like a fucking target, and yeah, if you're going to carry openly, don't be a fucking dick either. If someone says, "Why are you carrying that?" explain it to them. It's my legal right, things like that. But be polite about it. Don't be a fucking dick. I mean, if they're a dick to you, by all means, do what you got to do. But don't start off being a dick. You know, when someone says, "Why are you carrying that?" It's my right. It's probably not doing any of us any favors, is it? All right. Why? Because the liberal side considers those of us who carry guns to be overly aggressive and dangerous. Do not act like a stereotype unless you want all of us to be stereotyped. All right. You're representing all of us, so act accordingly. All right. Go out, do your thing, but present yourself well. Don't be a fucking dick. And maybe you'll win us some guys, some people to our side. What else does that mean? Don't go into a restaurant with your rifle slung. That is stupid. Stupid. Because you're kind of playing into their fear. Okay? You know, that I get it's legal in some areas, but use some common sense here. Okay? When you get 8 guys walking into a fucking coffee shop with a bunch of rifles, that's not helping us. That's scaring people. Alright? If you can't use good common sense, you shouldn't be carrying in the first place. And I have no problem saying that. So use good common sense about what you're doing. Okay? If you're going to maybe a pro-gun event or something like that, okay, you know, maybe the openly carried rifle ain't such a big deal now. But when you're just going to get a cup of coffee, the M4 can stay in the back of the car. Okay? I'm just saying, use good common sense. I don't care what you do, frankly, until it starts to affect me. Alright? So, just use good common sense is all I'm going to say. Alright? If you think it makes sense to carry your rifle, carry your rifle. If you think it makes good sense to carry your pistol openly, carry your pistol openly. But don't be a fucking dick, and don't look like white trash, and don't look like, you know, the latest 10 mugshots on arrest.org for your county jail. Alright? Yeah, that's just about the best advice I can give. We've got to win friends. We've got to vote for politicians that think the same way we do. We've got to get other people to vote that way. And we've got to understand the legal backing of what we're doing, because these are the questions that anti-gunners ask, and they think we don't know the answer to. And a great many gun owners do not. Here's your answers. Okay? I've already laid them out why gun control is actually illegal. Use it. Alright? You don't have to credit me for it or anything. Just say I found it on YouTube or some shit like that. I don't care. Alright? All of this, all my talking points, with the exception of me talking about the role model and your activism and all of that, this is all comes straight off Wikipedia. And I'll tell you what to search for if you want to find out more on your own. First, obviously the Constitution. You can look up the direct text Second Amendment there. 18 U.S. Code 2384, seditious conspiracy. The National Firearms Act of 1934. Gun Control Act of 1968. Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986 and the accompanying Hughes Amendment. The Brady Act of 1990, Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act is the specific name. Let's see. Yep, Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 93. And I forget the full name for it, but the Assault Weapons Ban in 1994. Alright, these are all the laws that are currently effectively on the books, with the exception like the gun-free school zone law and stuff like that. But that's a whole other issue. I can get into that later. I just didn't feel like doing it because I'm at just shy of 40 minutes as it is. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I know it's kind of boring, kind of dry, but it's meant to be informative, not entertaining. Again, I'm disabling comments on this video. So I hope y'all enjoy it and have a good day. Stay ready, stay frosty, stay in the fight, and always stay in the fight for your Second Amendment rights. You never know when, if they take one, when they'll start taking others. So, have a good day.